Rin-Bline by Benjamin Lamb. Isabel gripped the oil can tightly as she wandered beneath the surface. The metal tin swung side to side as she moved amongst the humming machinery. She looked over the components, making sure everything was running smoothly. The world around her felt like a haze. At that moment, there was no thought of the past or the future. She had learned not to bother her mind questioning it at all. I've been doing it for so long, she thought absent-mindedly, like reason doesn't matter anymore. There was only the present. She knew it was important to finish her task, even though she wasn't entirely sure why. "The boss needs to hear about this," Ernest said. Before the man spoke, Isabella had forgotten he was with her. She spun around to find her coworker standing only a few feet away. He was dressed in an orange suit and wore a brown cap atop his head. In his right hand, he carried a red toolbox, a flashlight in his left. His gaze was upward, intently focused on the wall before him. A gaping hole had been torn across its surface. A few loose cables hung down over the opening, one of them spraying sparks. Ernest turned his flashlight as scuttling echoed behind him. "Walkneer should be warned as well. No one else should be down below." "That's not supposed to be there?" Isabella asked, still staring at the hole. Ernest looked towards her, tilting his head slightly. "The memory of Rin-Bline is becoming loose," he said finally. "I guess everything fades in time." Chapter 1. The Core. After decades of reconstruction, the city of Rin-Bline looked like a shambled mess of design. Old concepts left unfinished, then redesigned. There was a constant hum beneath the streets, gears and contraptions of unknown use. Robert Callner didn't know the purpose of most of it. Neither did the owners, he thought, turning a corner. "The city almost has a mind to itself." His walk slowed as the booth came into view. It appeared the payphone was already in use. Reaching the red doors, he stopped. Leaning his back against its side, he began fidgeting with his hands. He felt a drop of water fall against his thumb. It then rolled across his skin and into his palm. Robert shivered. Maybe one of the pipes is leaking, he thought, looking up. The streets of Rin-Bline were not open to the sky. Cables and artificial lights extended along the face of the cave roof above. Even with the glowing light bulbs, there was still a constant surrounding gloom. It was then that the booth doors swung open and Robert shifted to his feet, watching as a pair of polished shoes emerged and fell against the sidewalk. The woman gasped when she saw him. She raised a hand to cover her open mouth. Robert stepped aside, maintaining the grim expression. He watched her run past, red heels echoing as she hurried down the road. Robert entered the booth. As the door clattered shut behind, he reached for the receiver. Dialing, he held it to his ear. At first, there was only his own breathing. A moment later came a clatter. Someone on the other end picked up. "Is it clear?" Robert asked calmly. "I'm not too far now." "It is," the speaker answered. "I'll make sure to have everything ready when you arrive." "Excellent." Robert hung up the phone. Putting a fist against his chin, he pushed left, then right. As he did, his neck gave a satisfying crack, its grinding echoing throughout the small box. "Right." Reaching up, he grabbed hold of a tuft of his hair. Gripping it from the base, he pulled upward. From the side of his head, a long cylinder slid out. It was a clear container of orange solution that splashed within as he raised it up. Its consistency, he found, was comparable to water. On the bottom end of the tube were a pair of spikes. These normally rested comfortably against his brain. Robert winced as the end came loose from his skull. Popping the canister open, he let the toxin drain. It splattered to his feet against the booth's floor. He sighed, then reinserted the tube. As relief washed over him, he let his shoulders fall. Back on the street, Robert continued onward. Strings of light glowed bright beneath the windows on either side of him. He was forced to move slowly as he grew closer to the meeting place. The building was located at the mouth of the city, typically in a state of constant traffic. He could see the opening in the cave roof. The sky was clear, beyond the rusted lips. "Must be good business for the inn," Robert imagined, peering over the head of the multitude. Steady flow of customers. The Walkneer was an inn at the summit of one of the massive pillar positions near the city's entrance. Its white walls stood out clearly from a stone like a star in the night sky. Robert thought, staring toward it. A sign hung down in front of the building's entrance, its red letters welcoming people to enter. They'll be full already, he thought, reaching the flight of stairs. Now that it's night, he could hear the voices above, marching up to the entrance. Robert paused. The moon was out. Beyond the mouth, he could see its waning face clearly in the sky. Robert pushed the door open. The interior was full of life as people conversed around the crowded tables. Looking past, he could see a glimpse of the wall revealing its surface chipped with peeling paint. Robert ignored all of it. Stepping through the threshold, he headed towards the far door. Reaching for the silver handle, he stopped to read the note on its front. No customers. Flinging it open, Robert marched inside. Laughter erupted from the common room as he closed the door behind him. The owner was already waiting. Robert Culner. Hello, Walkner, Robert stated as he approached the greasy man. It's been a long time. Yeah, the owner responded, scratching his chin. I'm glad you've come. What happened? Robert asked. What did you want to show me? I'll lead you to it, the innkeeper told him. Walkner looked just as Robert had always known him. He was an older fellow with gray hair hidden beneath a long-brimmed hat. Robert followed as Walkner began along the hallway. He walked a few steps behind, careful not to step on the end of the old man's trench coat. Here, Walkner said, pulling another door open. They were met by a stairway. The pillar was hollow, it seemed, the interior revealing a shaft leading into darkness. What is this? Robert asked. We believe it used to be a mine. A mine, Robert asked, peering under. Under the inn? The pathways down were constructed of wood against the concrete walls. From above, pulleys and cables hung down toward the floor. We're not the ones who built it, Walkner told him. The tunnels were found ages ago, but there's more in the darkness. That's what I wanted to show you. All right, Robert nodded. Let's see it. Together they began their descent. The four walls were plain as they went down, the surface uneven as his hand brushed against it. The passage ended on a colorless floor. Reaching its base, Robert gazed around at the grimy space that they had entered. Against the far wall, a rectangular door had been cut. This led to another hallway. Here, Walkner said, marching towards it. Stepping out, Robert peered down to his left end. Caves, he noted. I'll show you that when we get back up, Walkner said with a nod. But come in this way. I want to show you something else first. Breaching towards the right, the passage was built from an overwhelming series of industrial brass pipes. The tunnel looked as if it had been abandoned for years. It had become overgrown. Moss had risen to fill the gaps between the crevices and rounded off the corners. The air smelled damp as Robert took in a breath. Feels like walking inside someone's brain, he couldn't help thinking. Would everyone describe it that way? A place of twisting tunnels that even the owner can't escape. Maybe I'm alone in that observation. They turned a corner then, which led to another room. In its center was an orb of blue light suspended in a tangle of cables and pipes. Robert's eyes widened. What is this? He asked in awe. This is the core of Rin-Bline, Walkner told him. Its powers the city. How can that be? Robert asked. You found it unguarded? When we found it, yeah. I assume it's unknown to the higher-ups then. We've kept this quiet, Walkner answered. I've grown worried recently. Oh? They've been sending spies to the inn, Walkner responded, shaking his head. That's the reason I called you. What do you want me to do? In short, Walkner began, I want you to watch for me. Keep them away from the inn. But let's return to the stairs now. We will talk further after I show you the greenhouse. Greenhouse. In a cave we passed earlier. As they left the room, Robert noticed an indentation along the floor. There was a door here once. Returning back out to the passage, they could hear voices from the caves ahead. Yours? Robert asked. Turning, he found Walkner had stopped in his tracks. I don't recognize those voices. The innkeeper's face had gone pale. Someone followed us down here. Robert kept a hand against the wall as they continued. Emerging from the passageway, the pair headed into the cave. A thick layer of moss covered the floor like a carpet. Jagged rocks poked throughout in clusters. Trickling water streamed from the ceilings, forming a pool. The greenhouse was ahead. Like the rest of the cave, it was overgrown, its slanted roof covered in foliage. The pair moved cautiously, Walkner leading the way. A yard from the greenhouse doors, a bolt collided with the wall just above Robert's hand. They both dropped as a sound cracked the air, taking cover behind a boulder. "Get to the greenhouse," the innkeeper whispered, grabbing hold of Robert's wrist. "Once we're inside, we can ring for somebody upstairs." "Right," Robert nodded, reaching for the holster on his belt. "I'm going in first." "I'll cover you," Robert nodded. "I'll be right behind you. Go." He rose as Walkner darted forward, firing in the direction of their attackers. Walkner made it inside. He ducked once more as bolts blazed through the air. Robert grimaced as he watched the attackers take aim at the greenhouse. He saw Walkner take cover inside as gunfire shattered the glass walls. "My turn." Just as he began to rise, there came a sudden pinch in his brain. "Not now," he pleaded to himself. "I just need to make it inside." He realized that there was no arguing with it. Hesitantly, Robert raised a hand to release the cylinder. He cursed as he grabbed the tuft of hair, pulling open the compartment. As he pulled it up, a bolt grazed the top of his head. Stunned, Robert watched as shards exploded past his gaze. The delayed realization hit him moments later, as he felt the glass cylinder shatter. The orange toxin dribbled down his face, past his nose and onto his lips. It tasted like oil. Car fuel. Robert collapsed. He could still hear the bolts whizzing throughout the air, face against stone. He felt the toxins dripping between his lips onto the rocks. His vision went dark. Color shifted moment to moment in dreams. Blue faded to orange as he saw the woman's face. She raised a hand to her mouth, red fingernails pressing the tip of her nose. It shouldn't bother me anymore, Robert thought. Why would she be frightened of me? He had become used to such reactions. "I didn't choose who I am," he whispered to the darkness. "I am trapped this way. I feel pain. Alone."